Look at us legally recording a YouTube video in a national park under permit. Doesn't it feel good? I mean, knowing that our use of the park isn't going to impact all these other park users that you see, because we have a permit and we are somehow now okay to try to get a picture of a fox. Anyway, a lot has happened. It's later than I want it to be. There has been some snow. Currently the road through the upper elevations in the park is closed, and my thought would be they'll leave it closed. If we get a good chunk of better weather, it might open one more time. My guess would be that it won't. It's usually this time of year when they just shut it down anyway. So that kind of helped me make a decision, because I was trying to decide about cameras in the upper elevations after last year's experience, and I think it would be cool to see what we get, but I don't know if it's productive in terms of trying to get a fox, you know. Now we're on a time frame. I've got this permit through what I say, May, I think May of 24. So I want to use this winter to be productive and not just leave a camera and, you know, find it in the spring. So my thought is I try to stay close enough to the lower elevations that I can snowshoe in and maintain and check cameras and keep like the camera trap rolling through the winter. So I was actually hoping to find more snow in this lower part. You can see some snow over there. I was hoping to get into that where I might be able to see some tracks and stuff. But the other thing that's kind of cramping my style is trying to stay in this non-wilderness part of the park for my permit. If you watched the last video, I kind of explained that, but I'm approved to set camera traps, but I'm not approved in quote-unquote wilderness areas. So the park is broken up into wilderness and non-wilderness, which is frustrating, but okay, I can work with that. But what they don't seem to have is a really accurate wilderness map. I've gotten a couple copies of a couple different maps that show the wilderness and the non-wilderness, and you can't pull up a Google map satellite view from that and figure out exactly where that line is. It's just like a green blob and then a lighter green blob. You know, they don't have that overlaid on a very accurate map. So this part of the park that I'm in, two reasons that I'm here. Well, three. One is because of access. In the you know, in the deep part of winter, I think I can still get here. Second is the Park Service got a Sierra Nevada red fox on a trail cam last winter in this general neighborhood, not too far from where I am. So I know that the foxes come through here. And then the third thing I forgot already. I'm gonna probably have to think for a second. The third thing, I don't remember. Maybe it was two things. But that's why I'm in this area. Oh, the third thing was the map, the wilderness map. This part of the park that I'm in is non-wilderness on the side of the road that I'm on, and it's non-wilderness all the way to the border of the park, which means if I get out of their little map, I'm just in Lassen National Forest, which is fine. So I can't really make a map mistake. Remember, I have to send GPS coordinates of every camera that I set up to the park, and they'll email me back and say, don't go near there if I'm out of line. So this will keep me from making that mistake. So I'm poking around. I'm gonna follow this water. There's a couple good like log crossing kind of situations that I've seen already. That's kind of what I'm thinking. If I can find a good log bridge over some water. I got a couple trail cameras with me and the camera trap. I'm gonna get something set up and get this party started. So come back in a couple weeks after this and probably be a whole different scene around here with snow. But anyway, here we are. We are under permit in Lassen Park, which is great. So let's get it. Another reason I'm liking this area is because this like end of the park, I'm at the Manzanita Lake end of the park, and I'm going in from that road, which is currently closed 10 miles in at the devastated area lot, if you're familiar. But part of the reason I like being around here is because there's some human activity throughout the winter on this end of the park at the Manzanita Lake area. And foxes are always looking for food, you know. They're gonna come down to this area. I know they've been sighted at the like Eskimo Hill sledding area where people are. Scraps of food get left behind, which is not far from the gate on this end of the park. Anyway, just human activity I think is gonna attract them a little bit, as much as we don't wanna admit that, but they're looking for an easy meal. So people provide that, even if it's on accident. So it makes sense that they would come cruising through here, you know. So that's my hope. This is hard to navigate, man. This creek just kind of has all kinds of forks and everything's wet. I got to think about being able to get in here in snowshoes in a few weeks. But there's another log bridge that might be good. Yeah, I may throw a camera on that, a trail cam on that, just to get a look, but we'll find something. All right, there's like 100 ways across this water right here, coming from over that way. Seems like a likely place for all kinds of critters to cross. So I'm gonna, maybe on this little dead thing here, I'm gonna set up a trail cam to kind of keep an eye on this spot. I think you'll get stuff, but we can get a glimpse of a fox. If I'm over here, I don't know, I might find a better spot to put it, but I think this is a likely crossing at least. All right, camera one, looking kind of that way at all those logs. The GoPro's gonna be deceiving. It's closer than it looks. It'll trigger. Something moves over there, it'll fire. So that gives me the biggest, widest look kind of at this spot. So we will see if anything trips that one. But I better get a GPS marker on this so I can send it in. All right, this log is kind of exactly what I was looking for. A little bit higher elevation, it's a bigger area, so there's no easy way across otherwise. Seems like a pretty good bridge that might provide the right kind of bottleneck to get a critter. I've been looking all along it, hoping to find like some hair or something indicating that somebody's been using it, but I'm not seeing anything. So it's kind of a gamble. but it's a pretty good spot to set up the camera trap. I've got other wood I can mount stuff on, and seems pretty good. So I may put the camera here, the big camera, for a couple weeks, see if anything shows up. Trying to figure out where to mount everything. But if I'd found any little piece of hair or anything anywhere along, you know, on any of those little nubs, I'd be pretty excited, but no indication. But there's, like, you know, there's disturbances, like it's been traveled. So a little too small maybe for a bear, which is good for me. I don't want a bear messing with my camera, but that'll make a pretty cool image, yeah. Careful. All right, here's what we're gonna do. Mounted the camera on this guy, looking like that. So then the hope would obviously be that a fox or whatever is coming towards us. Got to just gamble on that. Because it's there's no way to set up a camera on the other side as good of an angle. I want that kind of upward angle. So there you go. I'm gonna put the trigger like over here somewhere and try to trip it while it's coming this way. Then I got to figure out lighting, but we'll get there. I'm like looking around at what I can mount flashes on. Probably low, looking up in a couple spots. Okay, I've had a couple comments on these videos asking about camera settings and stuff, and I've intentionally tried to not be like super photo geeky about these videos, but let me give you a little bit of that. We'll just dive in for the folks that are interested. So this is the Camtraptions V3 wireless trigger. All right, it's a infrared trigger that when it senses motion, it sends a signal, right? But it's more complicated than that. It sends a couple different signals. It'll basically simulate a half press shutter button and a full press shutter button, and it'll do that on multiple channels, right? So on one side of this there are dip switches. There's 6 of them, and you gotta like devour the manual to learn how to use this thing. But basically the first 2 are like day and nighttime cutoff modes, which I don't use. Those are off. The middle 3 do different things. One is like if you want it to send multiple images, like it'll send 4 different shutter press signals and that kind of thing. I don't use those either, and I'll tell you why in a second. The bottom one, the number 6, is the only one that I have turned on, and what that switch does is that sends a half press signal on a different channel to the receivers you have set up on your flashes. All right, so hang on a sec. Okay, so this is one of my Nikon SB28 flashes, which are used for camera trapping a lot because they have a huge long standby time and they last forever, right? This is a Camtraptions receiver that it's mounted on. And you can see the different lights on there, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are, I forget how many channels you can set them to operate on. But that dip switch number 6 that I was talking about on the trigger, when that's turned on, it will send a half press shutter signal to any receiver that is operating on whatever the camera channel is +1. So I have the camera on channel 1, the flashes are all on channel 2. So with dip switch number 6 on, when this trigger senses motion, it will send a half press shutter to these receivers on channel 2 first. Then it will trigger the camera so that the flashes basically wake up out of their sleep before the camera fires, so that the flashes fire on time. Okay, this side of the trigger, you've got a luminosity cutoff dial, which when you're using dip switches 1 and 2 for nighttime or daytime mode, you set the luminosity cutoff for when you want the camera to start firing. Like if you don't want it to fire during twilight, you only want it to fire when it's super dark, you can do that with this. This dial does nothing when dip switches 1 and 2 are off, which they are in my case. The second one is a time setting, like how many shutter presses you want it to send if you're using the multiple one, right? And then the bottom one is a sensitivity dial, right? So I've got the time thing cranked up, which goes along with what I was saying I would tell you in a second. And the bottom one is sensitivity. I have that like kind of in the middle. That's what you want to play with if you're getting like a little tiny critters triggering the camera you don't want them to, or you're getting like false triggers. I've found right in the middle kind of helps with the size of critters I'm usually trying to get, okay? The reason I don't use the multiple exposure signals from the trigger is because when you have it set on a single exposure, the shutter press length of the time that the button is pressed that it sends to the camera is 1 full second. So over to the camera real quick. Okay, I took my battery packs out of here just so it's not confusing. I'm using a Canon 80D camera, all right? The 80D has a burst mode, and it has a fast and a slow burst mode. When this camera is in slow burst mode, it'll do between 3 and 4 photos a second, right? So when that trigger is set to send a shutter press button of the length of a full second, it will get 4 pictures out of this camera. And I've found that with those flashes and the way I have it set up, the flashes have time to recharge, and you get usually 4 good photos from one trigger that way. If you have the trigger set up to send 4 different shutter press buttons, there's a full second interval between them. So you normally get 1 picture, and then a picture a second later where the animal's already gone, and then a picture a second after that, and then a picture a second after that, and then a picture a second after that. You get maybe 1 photo with the animal in it. And usually photo number 2 or 3 is better anyway if you have it set up this way. So that's why I use 1 shutter press button. This is the receiver that's plugged into the camera, right? This guy goes straight into the like intervalometer, you know, port on the camera. So when the trigger senses motion, it will send a wake up signal, like a half press signal, to the flash receivers operating on channel 2. This guy is operating on channel 1. So then it will send a signal to the camera. The camera will then fire for 1 second, right, in that slow burst mode. On top of the camera in the hot shoe, I've got another transmitter. And that's not a receiver, that's a transmitter. So that is operating on channel 2, and that is the one that sends the fire signal to the flashes. So the flashes are really getting 2 signals. The trigger tells them to wake up with a half press button, and then it tells this guy to, you know, fire the camera. Then this one tells the flashes to fire when the shutter drops, right? So that's how the system basically works. Camera settings. If I can wake this guy back up again here, what I do. All right, camera settings that I'm using. I've found 1/100th of a second gives me the best, like, how do I even describe it? The flashes will freeze the subject at night, right? So motion blur is not really an issue. when you're talking about a nighttime image, because the flashes pop, that's your frozen moment, right? And a little bit of drag, if the animal's moving fast, doesn't matter at that point. During the daytime, if your shutter's too slow, you'll get ghosting or motion blur, which you don't want, right? So 1/100th for an animal at a walk that's moving along leisurely, usually you don't get any blur. If something's running by, that photo's gonna be not good during the daytime, right? But 1/100th is a good compromise because it's slow enough to give you a little bit more light, but not so fast that you lose, you know, you get dark and everything. So that's what I got going on there. F9 I've found is the best forgiveness with depth of field, while still you could get away with F8 probably in most cases. You want more light, right, and a deep depth of field, but it's hard to find that balance. So F9 usually gives you enough forgiveness with your focus point, but it also gives you like enough light so that, you know, it's not stopped down so far that you get a really dark photo. ISO is a little trickier. I use the ISO. Am I staring at the sun? I'm gonna try to turn around. ISO is what I use to compensate for day and night. I'll put it on auto, but I'll set the max auto when the max ISO when on auto, like in the camera settings. I'll put that at 1600 on this camera. It does pretty good up to 1600 in terms of noise, and that gives you enough of an exposure with those other settings, with F9 and 1/100th I've found. With the flashes set at about, oh, that's the other thing, we'll get to that. Anyway, I'll set the max ISO when on auto to 1600 and then put the ISO on auto. So when it's nighttime, the ISO will slam all the way up to 1600. When it's daytime, it'll compensate down if it's a brighter scene when the camera wakes up, right? I was talking about the flashes. Everything's manual on the flashes, right? So I'll set the flashes usually at like 1/8 or 1/16 power, depending on how far they are from the subject and what you're trying to light up. You know, if I have like one main light, might be at 1/8 of power, and then two other lights like a secondary light source, and then maybe a backlight. Those will be lower, like at 1/16 or something like that. So pretty low on the flash settings, which is kind of why animals don't freak out for the most part. They're not that bright. It's a soft little pop of light, and I have a lot of video of animals just not reacting to it at all. So I feel fine about that. So there you go. If you have any questions about camera settings, hit me up in the comments. I'll try to answer them. But that's kind of the Photo Geek detour for this video. All right, on with setting it up. I should have explained my battery packs. These are D battery holders with little converters, so you can put 3 AA's in the place of 1 D. And I wired those to the little plugs that just plug in the external power port on those triggers, or on those receivers or triggers. So one of these in here runs to this receiver. The other one runs to that trigger. The camera battery's enough to get me 3 weeks plus, and the flashes themselves run on 4 AA's, and they outlast everything. Those SP28s last a long time. So this whole setup with all these battery packs gets me 3 weeks or so in the field. Okay, log view. My camera's there. I put a flash up there above my backpack and stuff. There's a flash down there. There's a flash by the camera. The trigger is down here. And I don't know if you can see it, but the focus point is like that little twig. So I'm locking it. I'm gonna see when it triggers. I think it's early. I gotta adjust my trigger a little bit. Yeah, I might move that a tiny bit. So focus point is that twig. Trigger's picking me up too far back. Trigger's here. I got the little blinders, so it's kind of, you know, supposedly right in here, but it's picking up back here. So I'm gonna move it a little bit. Well, that is just giving me a whole bunch of information, huh? You're the blue dot. There you are. I'll just send that to the park. All right, that is the camera that survived the winter. So back for more. It's looking at the scene. There's the camera trap camera. So this guy should pick up the action, and hopefully we get like a squirrel or something that'll tell us how the trigger's working and we can make adjustments. That's why I like to put a camera looking at the camera trap, shooting video, so that you can see where it actually triggers and you know, if it's working right. So there you go. This is the setup. I'm gonna wander around this area a little bit more and see if I can find anything else worth considering for next time. But here we are. Look at this place, man. How cool. I just spooked a couple of ducks up there. They probably don't see people very often. What a cool spot. So I'm kind of expecting a slow start here, but once the snow really starts in and the high country gets really hammered, these guys start moving down a little bit, looking for food, at least occasionally. That's our hope. So we are not too far below tree line, but definitely not the same environment we were in up high, right? I was hoping to find something on these logs. That's a gray squirrel hopping around. I was really hoping for more snow on the ground, just for the hope of tracking something. But next time there'll be plenty of that coming.